Remembering the Night That Changed America. For the BBC World Service documentary, Trump Re-Elected, I spoke to political insiders and reporters who had a front row seat for election night 2016. From a campaign assured they were entering the history books with the first female president, to a victorious but surprised Trump team surrounded by the raucous supporters who brought them there. My election night started at Hillary Clinton's victory party at the Javits Convention Center, where crowds were gathering to witness what they thought would be a night that would change America. It was, but not like they imagined. Jim Margulis, senior Clinton campaign consultant. You know I'm normally a glass half empty kind of guy. I'm always thinking we are never going to make it, even in 2012, in that race with President Obama. This was the first big presidential campaign, and I've been involved in a lot of them, where I was absolutely convinced we were gonna win. Amy Waters, national editor, The Cook Political Report. The mood suggested a Hillary Clinton victory was on its way. Among the thousands in the Javits Center was someone with a very different view, Charlie Spearing, the White House reporter for Breitbart, the conservative website headed by Steve Bannon, which had done much to propel Donald Trump's campaign. Charlie Spearing, White House reporter, Breitbart. I was really looking for a sort of weird night for me, because this is a candidate who attacked my news organization, as well as my boss, Steve Bannon. We showed up and they'd put most reporters in this massive basement with these huge TVs, so there wasn't very much to do other than to talk to other journalists. Meanwhile at Donald Trump's victory party a few blocks away at the Hilton Hotel, it seemed the setup was geared more for a concession speech, or at least a final party before his team members went their separate ways. Mark McKinnon, presenter and executive producer, The Circus. You know, in all their body language and all the signals we look for in campaigns, they looked like a campaign that was preparing for a bad night. Sebastian Gorka, Trump campaign advisor. I guess if I was honest with myself I was more than a little concerned. But hopeful. Josh Green, author, Devil's Bargain, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump and the storming of the presidency. There was a sense they had done all they could. Waters. And then the early exit polls came in, which also showed her ahead in the key states. And then election night started to unfold. Kristen Soltis Anderson, columnist and conservative pollster. On election night I was on ABC News in New York City. I was going to be on air with their team. We had a meeting to discuss these exit polls. Jenna Johnson, Washington Post campaign reporter. I was in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. Even though I had been covering the campaign and could have been at the election headquarters, I wanted to be out amidst the people who voted for him, and people who believed in him. I talked with all sorts of people. A lot of people in their 50s and 60s who hadn't voted in a couple of elections who used to be Democrats, but just really believed in Trump and really wanted to vote for him. That night I was in a bar in Latrobe called Sharky's, and there was a dozen or so people there. Nearly all of whom seemed to have voted for Trump, and they were watching the results come in. Green. Bannon told me that he was never worried, he always believed Trump was going to win. The only time he admitted to me his confidence was shaken was just after 5 p.m., when the first exit polls came out and showed Clinton either ahead, narrowly in a lot of swing states, or tied in states the Trump campaign had been sure they were going to win. And that shook his faith briefly. In this election, the two candidates both claimed New York as their home, and their election night headquarters were set up within mere blocks of each other. Green. The fifth floor of Trump Tower, which was a wide-open, almost industrial-looking space, had once been used to film The Apprentice. There was nothing there except for some card tables in a room that had been constructed out of plywood so ugly that Dave Bossie, the deputy campaign manager, dubbed it the crack den. And that was where the Trump Brain Trust had decided to set up, it was their VIP room. Bill Stepien, the political director, had a laptop which he could project onto the walls of the crack den, so they could see the returns as they came in and figure out what they wanted to do and respond. A lot of people would cycle in and out. This was the place with the information. And of course Trump and Melania were high upstairs in their penthouse waiting for the proper moment to come down. Margulis. I spent the evening in what was Clinton's private office, near Times Square. That included a lot of the senior folks from the campaign, Chairman John Podesta, a lot of senior staff, pollsters, and so on. Early, before results started to come in, there was a sense it was going to be a good night. We had a pretty strong turnout operation in a lot of the states, and it was just standing by to get results. The first sort of warning sign was early when we began to look at Florida. Steve Schall, Florida political consultant, involved in Obama campaigns. I was actually in a bar in Orlando, Florida. I was hosting a group of election dignitaries because I was not working the election cycle. What's interesting is about 70% of Florida voters had voted before election day. So between 7 and 7:05 a lot of the early counties reported huge numbers of votes, and actually, early in the night it looked very, very good for Secretary Clinton. Waters. Democrats had been boasting for the last couple of weeks about the early vote, how they had bagged all these early voters, especially Hispanic, younger voters. Anderson. And eventually I began noticing, sure, Hillary Clinton is doing perfectly fine in Orange County, a typical bellwether county, but look at what is happening in Sumter County, just to the north of Orlando, where you have the Villages, a very popular senior citizen retirement community. It looks like turnout is very high there. What's going on in Sumter County? Maybe Orange County is not the bellwether. Shall. By 7:45 it became pretty obvious she was not going to be where she needed to be. Margulies. And we were quickly trying to talk to anybody we knew in Florida. Spearing. I remember at some point around 7 p.m., when the media atmosphere was very celebratory, and they were pretty certain they had a story ready for the conclusion, but around 7 p.m. it got serious again. I remember taking a picture of everyone getting ready really quickly. Margulies. And as we were starting to get some of our numbers in at headquarters. I want to talk to Shell, I want to know what's going on down there. Shell. In Florida, about 10 counties vote in the Central Time Zone. Democrats traditionally lose those counties by 100,000 votes, so she was actually not ahead by enough votes knowing what she was going to lose in the Panhandle. So about 7:45 I called the Clinton operation and pretty much told them that they were going to lose. What was interesting was for over the next hour there was a lot of disagreement with my observations. Margulies. Shao was one of the first people, he said, look, this isn't over but I got real concerns about what's taking place down here. I think he was probably the first person that said, to me at least, this isn't going to happen. Shall. I was surprised it took the news networks until 11 o'clock to call Florida. I thought they could have called it at 8:15 p.m. They really thought they had Florida. She was ahead by almost 250,000 votes going into election day. So they had reason to be optimistic, and they were just shocked, as we all were. Michael Steele, former Republican National Committee chairman. Republicans were still sort of scratching their heads going, he can't win this, can he? And that was the thinking for almost an hour and a half afterwards, as it became very apparent that something was going on in parts of the country that was going to change the dynamic of this race, and potentially its outcome. For Trump's supporters, there was a sense that their calculation about the electorate was paying off. Gorka. The thing about this election, it was being measured by prior models. They just didn't apply. States that were deemed to be a given blue state were no longer blue states. Jonathan Allen, journalist, author of Shattered, Inside Clinton's Doomed Campaign. He is far outperforming Mitt Romney in Florida, not just rural areas, but also suburban areas. And they see that and start to realize if they start, meaning her data analysts and campaign manager, if they extrapolate that North Carolina is going to look the same. It's the same in Pennsylvania, same thing in Wisconsin and Michigan. And so she may lose. Green. When I was down in the Trump campaign bunker, a couple of weeks before the election, they had a tool, the Battleground Optimizer Path to Victory, which spit out the likeliest path through the states. And Florida was far and away the most important state to them. Gorka. Steve was always optimistic and Steve said to me, we will win this. Now that a path to the presidency was opening for Donald Trump, attention shifted to the Trump Campaign Victory Party. Breitbart's Charlie Spearing concluded a change of location was necessary as it became apparent that Trump was on a path to victory.